Yeah, and I'd like to move into also one other favorite topic of yours, which is Julia and programming languages and whatnot. But to make that trip, let me make an hypothesis here and see what if you agree or not with it. But if we hypothesize that a lot of companies today are very hardware based, it can be that they have stores that they need to sell products in. It can be that they manufacture stuff. It can be that they need to work with physical things in various ways. And Elon at least has shown that they can start to move that to become an increasingly higher level of software that is really determining how the product works. And if you are becoming increasingly into software, that means you need to program more and have higher level of code quality, so to speak, in being able to have high quality software. And then, how do you efficiently program software or build code? And I would like to hear what you have thought about, what is really machine learning and how does that differ from like manually programming software? What's your view on that? Can machine learning be a way to improve quality of software?
Wow. Of course. Is the obvious answer, of course. But then you have to sort of, how do you actually get your code and transform it into data that is analytically tractable? Then you have a sort of translation problem, because you're going from code repositories and some have to treat them as data, and that's basically an NLP project to a large extent.
But if we continue on the Tesla track and just having,
but it can be done, of course.
If you just have compare the two things, let's make a self-driving car, and that's an extremely complicated process, of course. But let's say you just want to do automatic parking or something.
Yeah.
And you can have a set of engineers that are trying to program exactly the rules, trying to define, if you turn in this way, then you can perfectly, perform the parking. And then the alternative of, trying to just use data and learn it in some automated way. Would you say that that's a fair description of what machine learning is and a potentially better way to do it? Or
I don't think machine learning is actually the way to go there.
Now we're getting interesting topics.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, because now we're veering into the sort of general AI problematics of learning.
Mm-hmm. Even for parking a car. You need general AI, you would say, for parking a car?
Now I'm actually veering into topics that sort of I don't really have a word for, but I've been debating this with myself for the last 6 months, and you can generalize learning, not in the terms of general AI as human intelligence, because that's very general, sort of universal intelligence.
But I can argue that point also, but yeah, it's certainly very general, more so than most deep learning.
But it comes back to my sort of view on how you do analysis. You have to include context. And if you can get an AI to understand the context of the problem it's there to solve, you have to generalize the learning for that environment, not just the problem.
Yeah, not just memorizing, but actually generalizing to handle.
Yeah, so it needs to learn the general patterns of the environment. As a child learns to walk, it has to learn its own environment, and then it can start applying. Then you can start applying sort of goals and rules. How you do that, given the environment. I mean, it has to know the environment.
So parking a car is a key. Then you can probably define a quite sharp frame of that environment for that particular example, I guess. Or?
I mean, you don't think parking a car is specifically difficult because you've done it for quite a few years. But I mean, there's
Tesla car can do it quite well today already. Right?
Yeah, in defined situations. And that's the problem, is that you're not always going to have a school book example of a parking space.
So in average, who do you think parks a car the best, a human or a Tesla? Just pure aggregated statistic point of view.
No one.
No, but I think the core point is
people park the cars like clowns and idiots.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
shouldn't a Tesla then do it better?
And that is sort of one of the interesting points about AI is that the notion of satisficing.
A notion of what?
Satisficing.
Okay, satisficing. What do you mean?
Because if you're an agent moving in a space with other agents, those agents are going to make mistakes, and they're going to fuck up your perfect plan, which means that you have to deal with changing circumstances and contingencies of other idiots doing mistakes, which means that you have to have a dynamic approach to your own priorities and how you actually approach what is an acceptable solution.
But doesn't that apply for humans as well?
Yeah.
They have to take care about all the assholes in the traffic.
Yeah, and we do that.
Yeah. And doesn't machines do that, you would say? Or
no, because machines are binary. I mean, either you, of course, you can put it on a gradient, but mostly you have sort of a school book example of this is how it should be done, this is how it should look. If it doesn't look that way, relinquish control to the driver.
Cool. So when would you say that you think we will have level 5 self-driving cars that it doesn't even have a steering wheel in them on the streets?
That's a matter of legislation rather than technology, I think.
So
I think the technology will be there quite sooner than the legislation will allow it to be implemented.